So a very warm welcome. It's awesome to be here. I'm Raj Raman. I'm the CTO for Cloud at Unisys, where I drive cloud strategy and the roadmap. And joining me today is Ali Khan. Ali.
Hi doing everyone, good evening. Nice to see you all at reInvent. My name is Ali Khan, I work with Raj. I'm one of the chief architects for Unisys Global and the WellArchitected Framework ambassador.
Thank you, Ali.
Raj.
How many of you are aware of the AWS WellArchitected Framework? Some of you? Awareness? Excellent. How many of you are actually leveraging the AWS WellArchitected Framework? You are. Some of you. Okay. Excellent. So at Unisys, we spent quite a bit of time with very large clients. We count 20 of the largest 25 airports as our customers, very large banks, very large enterprises, some very large federal clients as well. The common theme that we hear from all of them is they ask for three things on the cloud. Three things. Can you help us do the cloud and transformation on our terms? Second, can you make sure that it is done the right way with the right architectures? And third, make sure that it's done securely. But the problem is, it's not easy. The architectures on the cloud, especially on AWS, are very easy to start, very hard to scale. This is the reason why 35% of the cloud spend is wasted. More than 40% of the challenges on cloud and compliance is because there's lack of visibility. There's a well-known bank, we heard about them. They got breached for a very simple reason, human access. If they had practiced the well-architected framework, perhaps. So all of this makes scaling up of the cloud very, very complex. But architectures are the whole essential bedrock. So how do you tame this complexity? So this is where myself and Ali today wanted to share some of our own experiences. We have 1,400 plus architects, at Unisys. We have many clients and customers who are using AWS. This is some of our journey, especially in using some of these frameworks, but for building applications. Applications are the reason that a lot of our clients are leveraging AWS. But they tell us, how do we decide what is the best approach? Should we rehost? Should we refactor? How do we leverage Kubernetes? Not everybody is a DevOps engineer. Not everybody understands shift left. There are many customers out there who struggle. They do want to leverage things like the well-architected framework from AWS, but you need a group of people. You need certified architects. Is it possible to go and codify that? How do you take all of that and put that into a very simple thing and then put it into your CI/CD pipeline or into your application lifecycle? So we at Unisys have spent a lot of time the last year or so, and we have built on top of the AWS WellArchitected Framework. And now I'll request Ali, to share through some of our own experiences on what it means to build and scale secure applications built on top of the AWS WellArchitected Framework. Ali?
Thank you, Raj. Thank you, everyone. So as we're building our architecture and migrating with different services onto public clouds, what we need to focus on is basically the different type of Unisys what we offer as Unisys. We built a UNAV, Universal Navigator, and why we built this solution is for ease, to minimize the complexity of migrating applications, basically building and deploy faster, basically improving or mitigating risks in such ways. So continuous improvement is another factor, as well as data-led decisions. Now I want to tell a story. We have a client a financial institution that reached out to us about 6 months before. They had a lot of issues with their environment, starting off with their deployment strategies. Their CI/CD pipelines were not configured properly. They had compliance issues, no guardrails. So we actually worked with them on understanding their issues and using UNAV as a well-architected tool to identify these complexities, to remediate these solutions. So we not only worked with them on risks that they could have, unforeseen risks that could have been a big issue down the line, like Raj mentioned, Capital One, Equifax, data breaches, data leaks, intrusion detections. We can mitigate risks accordingly. Data-led decisions, basically using AI ML technologies to understand data at rest, which type of data that we're accessing, any PII data, any data that should not be exposed as externally should stay internal. We can identify those through tagging, through well-architected framework. If we're following the best practices, we're understanding the risks, we're understanding all these different compliance issues, we can remediate them accordingly. This is basically the front end of our UNAV from Cloud Forte. Over here we see workloads. So we define a workload. As you can see there, workloads are basically your assessments. In the first two sections on the bottom, you see that there's 2 workloads already in place. Once the workloads are done, we ask a series of questions. What happens is we get a mark, a ranking. Either it's a high or medium. The high ranking, basically, with the high risks, we actually target them first versus the medium risks. What happens is the high risk are your higher level of security concerns. The medium risk are followed after. We can set up milestones after this assessment. We can set up remediation processes accordingly. UNAV, why UNAV? How is it architected? Understanding the components. So if we start off from your left to right, you'll see that the first level is identifying your workloads. So what type of workloads you have. This starts off with a questionnaire. So in my case, when we had a client approach to us and ask us, how do we well architect our framework? What type of pillars to use? We focused for them on the additional pillar, which is the application pillar. So the well-architected framework with all different, with AWS, does have the 5 preliminary pillars that you see there in the white, which covers the operational excellence, security, reliability, performance, efficiency, and cost. The 6th pillar here listed is our customized pillar that we've established. UNAV basically is a framework, I call it. It's integratable with different services. It's customizable. So with the WAF assessments done through AWS and public clouds today, we have only 5 pillars with series of questions. With UNAV, we have that additional 6th pillar, the application pillar. So starting off with the identifying workloads, we go into a series of questions, identifying each question based on the different pillars. In our case, I'll be talking about the application pillar. So what is your application structure? Your CI/CD pipeline, your landing zones, how are you setting them up? What are the core requirements? What are the best practices of setting up a landing zone? Your application configurations. Are your applications FedRAMPed? What are the patching levels of your applications? Understanding those components and then going through a report generation process. Once we generate the report, we actually start the ongoing assessment. Before that, we have a compliance tool that's called CCD. It's called a compliance director, which runs with UNAV. So UNAV is a first level complete assessment of your different pillars, and the CCD is an ongoing compliance tool. So if you have a PCI compliance, you have SOH, you have any sort of NIST compliance, a CIS, we'll cover that CCD component there. Following that is our final optimization remediate process, in which we identify all your workloads based on different pillars, your risk, your ranking, and then we work with you on remediation process of each and every pillar that's listed down here. For applications, how is your CI/CD pipeline built? Is it following best practices? Do you have any encapsulation requirements? Do you have any CIS compliance, etc.?
Introducing
I'll be covering a
Cloud
video
Architecture Navigator,
on Unisys UNAV.
part of the Unisys Cloud Forte offering. UNAV provides a checklist-driven framework to help
Good, man.
cloud architects and consultants
Yeah, a little
review
bit.
and
Yeah,
evaluate
thank
a client's enterprise
Speak
cloud
a bit more louder.
architecture using
Speak a little
Unisys
louder.
and
Again.
industry best practices. UNAV delivers automated recommendations and best practices for making a client's cloud infrastructure and applications more reliable, secure, and efficient across key cloud pillars such as cost, security, performance, operations, and availability. A Unisys consultant or architect collaborates with the client during a consulting engagement session and over the term of the contract. The UNAV framework is based on 5 pillars of best practices cloud design: security, cost, operations, reliability, and performance. These pillars help the client obtain an initial measurement and continuous visibility into their architectural integrity. These pillars also provide guidance for optimum utilization of infrastructure capacity needs. The generated report data empowers the client to make fact-based decisions on how to improve their workloads. Let's take a tour of the Unisys Cloud Architecture Navigator.
So this was a general video that covered most of our UNAV capabilities, starting off with our architecture review assessment journey. When we have a client that approaches us, in our case we had a financial and a HIPAA compliant organization that reached out to us for assistance. They wanted to review the pillars. So the step we take with UNAV is sort of a type of a journey. What we do is we have UNAV, we sit with the clients, we do an initial complete review of their workloads, their environments, which you see in the gray area right there. Then we identify the risks. What are the risks? Do identification process. Now this is based on pillars, all the 5 pillars, as well as the 6th application pillar. Once we run this assessment, we generate a report. The report gives us the ranking of high, medium. Then we set up milestones based on those reports. What are the high critical areas that we need to identify and start remediation process? With this comes project opportunities and then reassessments as we engage. Now the reassessments, we have a UNAV CCD component, which is a cloud director. What that does, it does a continuous compliance reviews based on time frames or continuous as the organization requires. The application modernization pillar that I've been mentioning, the 6th pillar, that's the unique customizable pillar. We can not only, UNAV can not only customize this additional pillar, but add more additional pillars as requirements grow. We can modify different type of questionnaires based on each pillar. So UNAV has that capability of modifying questionnaires, customized for clients' needs, and to be specific in that area. The application pillar basically covers the pre and post migration processes. We had a client that really approached us that wanted to leverage a high-level migration on-prem to AWS. We worked with them on identifying pre and post applications, what type of applications, what are the requirements, what are the workloads, what are the best practices to follow. For example, instance sizing. We don't want to just use different type of instances or baseline instances. We want to use the database level instances, application instances, web content, whatever match the optimization of that specific application to perform on. We gather those requirements pre and post, and we do the migration strategy. Again, the application pillar follows best practices. We use UNAV to basically do the assessments to identify what type of requirements, the best practices, the different type of questionnaires around the applications that are being migrated. What are the remediations for those? What are the best practices to follow? And then following the CCD, which is the cloud director, that keeps us ongoing with the compliances. Now the application layer works with different type of components. We have a offering called Cloud Forte. Different application modernization processes require accelerators. We've built pre-built accelerators from Cloud-Forte for your log aggregation, your monitoring, your alerting, your workload distributions, asset management, Splunk integration. So we have pre-built accelerators following best practices natively from AWS that can be leveraged with this product. We can set up your control tower landing zones, any sort of compliance like PCI, HIPAA compliance, any sort of NIST compliances at the federal level. We can cover those as well. This is basically a flow of the application migration. As you can see, we do first, which is the application review. We ask a series of questions, about 100 of them, understand what the requirements are. Then we do a review category process. We identify which category you're reviewing, you fall under. Then we do a computed dimension review, which is based on cloud model or your 6Rs or customization that are being required. Then we do a discovery and assessment, and then final outcomes. When we're doing an assessment, we have a questionnaire. So this is basically an example of how your questions will be posed. So I would talk about the application layer. So we'll focus on the DevOps. DevOps is like if you're running a CI/CD pipeline or not. What is the baseline configurations? Are you looking for any security to encapsulate your data, etc. Second level is landing zones. This falls under the application layer. Landing zones, how are you defining your OUs? How are you defining your guardrails, your policies, any sort of VPC requirements that you might have that you want to cover? Covers those aspects. This is another version of the same slide. It just basically covers the cloud model, 6Rs, and any sort of landing zone definition parameters that need to be configured prior to modernizing your application. Right here, as an architect, once you complete a review, your engineers or architects are seeing a similar type of view. If you see, these are the pillars listed, and based on each pillars, we have the high, medium ranking. The high are your critical areas that you need to be focused on to identify, remediate. Medium are medium level ones. At a high risk, you're prone to, if you don't resolve them, you're either overutilizing you might be facing performance issues, you might be prone to data attacks, outside and internal DDoS attacks, or any sort of network level issues that are open ports basically, that you can identify and resolve with high. Mediums are something you can set up as a milestone and resolve accordingly. Landing zones, as I mentioned, is a critical component as an application layer. It basically covers all the private. So when we're setting up landing zone, what type of areas you should focus on? You have public and private subnets on your VPCs. You have VPCs that you have to set up. You can do peering, application to application. These are components of landing zones. Now the question here is, are you doing cloud right? What are the measures you're taking on well-architecting your framework, well-architecting yourself to not be prone to any sort of attacks or non-compliances? UNAV is a solution which is easy to implement, easy to use. We have engineers certified. We can work with you on identifying your issues, key areas. We can set up milestones of finding those remediations and work with you hand in hand to resolve them. We take a data-driven approach in which we work with you. We have different type of architects. We have our application cloud engineers that are always available to assist. We leverage the best practices across your organization to make you well architected so you're on board with the latest and greatest compliances. And finally, we provide guidance and remediation processes along the way.
Well, thank you, Ali. Do you have any questions? We have about 60 seconds. If anybody has got any questions, we're happy to take it.
And if you want to raise your hand, I can bring you the microphone.
So in conclusion, we just want you to remember 3 things. Do cloud where architectures are important. In order to do it well, focus on architectures, focus on doing it with scale, and do it with security. Thank you.